What's going on, you guys? Kenny here, also known as SolidFan85. Welcome to another vlog. I'm a bit on a vlogging binge here, which happens. This will be my third one recorded today. I was thinking the other day, and I logged it mentally to do a video on this at some point. I think I may have done one of these in the past, but discussing being a 90s kid. I was born in 85. I am technically a Zennial. And I got to thinking, my generation was the last generation to really experience growing up without like mobile technology, without direct access to the internet. I'm one of the last generations, I'm part of the last generations to be able to say that for sure. So, in a lot of ways, I would argue that I'm qualified to sit on the fence about, in ways, about technology, especially social media, having an impact on a childhood, on the internet, and at the same time knowing what it's like to live without mobile technology as a kid. Because the most of my teenage years, I was half of my teenage years actually, I was with and without technology. It was a mix because, I mean, you're talking about a time where we still had payphones, when dial-up was still a thing. AOL was the dominant monster when it came to connecting to the internet. And so dial-up was pretty limiting. I mean, you know, you had to share a phone line with your family. You couldn't get online all the time. You weren't constantly connected. And so I lived outside for a lot of my childhood. You know, I lived outside. I went out, rode a bike. I did all kinds of things. And if I wanted to do anything, or talk to anybody, like in a chat or whatever, if it didn't happen in the AOL chat room later in life, it happened on a party line that my school had set up. And if you don't know what a party line is, it's a number you call into. And the way it worked was that we had pre-recorded voice messages. You would record yours, it would be put in a queue, and then people would talk back and forth to each other. It was honestly a bit of a budget way to do a party line, especially for school, but they did it to try to get students to engage with each other, without actually having to be face to face, because we were starting to enter that point where I think socially, a lot of educators started noticing that we started disconnecting a bit, when it came to social engagement. And there's a lot of truth to that today too, because a lot of discussion takes place on the internet, especially if you're part of the Twitterverse like I am, or if you're a YouTuber. A lot of our discussions can be seen in the comments. A lot of our discussions can be seen in Twitter, and it seems as though social circles have gotten smaller and more digital. So, as a kid that was a part of that era, you know, I'm 35 now. I'm old. I'm old by some standards, and it occurs to me that I'm not sure where we're going to be. You know, I'm not sure where we're going to be, with generations growing up with mobile technology directly at their access. We'll obviously be a lot more informed, and you'll never convince me otherwise. Because these current generations that are coming up, you know, that are younger than I am, they're some of the most informed people and kids and turning into adults that we will ever see. There is a vast access to knowledge there, where it is causing to do away with these old school thoughts and thinking that didn't work in the first place, but were still perpetually forced on us. So I have a lot of hope in that regard for future generations. But when it comes to the social aspect, I don't think that'll be entirely lost, but it will be severely limited compared to what we used to be. We're still gonna engage, and in a lot of ways, we engage on a global platform now, which is awe-inspiring. I mean, it's crazy because before the internet and even before the phone, we were so sectioned off in the world. We didn't know anything about other cultures. We didn't want to know. We were so close-minded. But with the internet, boom, everything opens up. We are talking to people in other countries. We are getting insight into their lives, what's going on. We start to see similarities in our cultures and differences in our cultures that over time, because of the internet, is going to be gradually more accepted and taken to less extremes. And we're at a last gasp of these negative things being seen and gradually more accepted, which I think, again, because I'm a humanist, and I believe that humans are capable of great things, and I respect them for that. And when we can come together as a whole, and the internet is being able to do that, it's going to be a great benefit. But again, at the same time, social circles, especially locally, will suffer again compared to what it used to be. So, there's a lot to be said. I mean, there's a lot to be said. As a Zennial, as a guy that's 35, I was born in '85. Little child of the '80s, bigger child of the '90s. Throughout my 20s, I was literally right, between 2005 and 2015. I was 20 to 30 years old, and I was about to prime your life for the most part. And you see changes. You see things changing. It's not. That's the way life goes. Older generations have seen it. They can't understand entirely why we rely so much on technology. But when it's all you've known growing up, for current generations, it's all they're gonna know, and it's gonna feel like a handicap if you don't have technology. So there needs to be an understanding there for older generations. There needs to be an understanding that while you grew up in a time to where technology wasn't prevalent, and in all honesty, we relied more on ourselves and our own thinking, our own critical thinking, and having to go to the ends of the earth to even be slightly informed without having to rely on biased media, mostly biased media that just want to tell you what to think, and what you should feel. Um, at the same time, technology gives current generations a boon in that they have access to things that was only ever dreamed of in sci-fi. We're doing things that was only ever dreamed of in sci-fi. So there's always a give and take. But at the same time, current generations need to realize too that you've got to you've got to live for yourself. You've got to become engaged as much as you can. You've got to continue to strive to connect socially, not become what is known as an otaku, which is basically being closed off, only being on the internet, playing video games, comics, TV, whatever. For a lot, especially in the American culture, we are so obsessed with TV. We're so obsessed with media. It's honestly, it's our own fault. I mean, if you had a family that was gathered around the TV and ate dinner, and didn't really break away from the TV to chat as a family, there's really nobody else to blame but ourselves. There were households that were the total opposite though. They set aside time to sit around the table, chat as a family, and so on and so forth. But majority of us, we sat in front of a TV. We sat and watched TV. We watched movies, and because our lives are so hectic, we work so hard nowadays just to keep food on the table. We're overworked in so many ways that we want to, and we feel that we need to just have moments of laziness, and it can be tiring sometimes, especially after a long day of work, that you don't really want to talk with anybody. You might want to banter back and forth between a show, But for the most part, you just want to zone out and just focus on something that you don't have to think a whole lot. And that's unfortunately a sad truth. So, there's a lot happening with current generations as compared to older generations. But from my personal standpoint, there's also a lot of good coming. So as a kid of the 90s, as a kid that grew up on Blink 182, that grew up on the American Pie saga, that grew up with dial-up and AOL chat rooms, and you couldn't look at porn without having to wait for an image to load. Porn's a totally different subject, but I just do that to make a point because there was a time that I could speak to personally, and there's plenty of others in my generation too that are around the same age group. That while these old timers may be coming at the younger generation saying you kids need to get out more, there is some truth to that. But at the same time, for the older generations, this is what these kids know. This is what they're growing up into. While some folks may see it as sad, while some folks may see it as a deficient on the human experience, it's just a part of the way our cultures evolve, and there are going to be drawbacks to it, but both generations and both groups of people in those age groups need to accept that things used to be one way and things are now another way. It happens. And another thing I would say is that older folks going after younger folks and blaming them for everything, and younger folks going after older folks and blaming them for everything, is nothing new. Okay, that has been going on for hundreds of years. Because again, society does evolve. Humanity does evolve mentally, socially, technologically. And one generation is used to one way of life, and another generation is going to be used to another way of life. So it's just how it goes. So if you ever find yourself going after, at this point in this recording, a boomer, or if you find yourself as a boomer going after a millennial, just remember, both generations come into their own at their own time. And what you're doing when you're perpetuating the mockery of one generation, just remember, your parents did the same thing. Your kids are going to do the same thing. So, get used to it. But, maybe it's just a rite of passage at some point to be able to do that, So, anyway, as a kid of the 90s, I consider myself on the in-between as of this point in our history. And, needless to say, I miss the 90s. I catch myself reminiscing. I catch myself listening to older songs that I listened to growing up. Again, especially Blink 182. Blink 182 was just the shit back in the day. Along with, for me, Sum 41 and other bands of similar taste. And, teen movies were like American Pie were a thing. Stuff like Scary Movie was a thing. And it was just a hell of a time to be alive, man. And it's when gaming, which is what the channel is based around, was really at its, to me, in my opinion, at its most wholesome. I could get into that into another vlog, but that's my quick take on it. So anyway, with that said, I am done. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Remember, you're awesome, no matter what generation you are, and never let the world tell you otherwise. See ya.